Welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking about the magical little pink digital box, the PolyFX Digit. This thing, look at it. It's amazing. And why you might want to consider grabbing one of these if you're a guitar player who likes cool effects, likes using your amp modeler, and wants the option of having something like a Eurorack synthesizer in a tiny little pink box. Crazy, isn't it? Let's get into it. There's been a couple of firmware updates for Digit over the last month or so, and I want to start by looking at one of the coolest features, which if you look on the touchscreen there, it looks pretty daunting, but you can see some yellow lines, and they are brand new connections made to these new MIDI CC to CV blocks. And what that means is that if you've got a MIDI controller or say an amp modeler like the Fractal FM3 that I'm going to use in this demonstration that can send MIDI CC messages, we can send those CC messages into Digit and turn them into control voltage signals, meaning that if you want to have a preset stacked with a bunch of Digit modules, you can now turn them on and off individually without having to change presets. A bunch of you noticed on my last video with Digit where I was using it with the FM3 and sending MIDI program changes to this. Let's say if you change to a preset that has 24 delay modules in Digit, it takes a little bit of time to load up. This is a great workaround using MIDI CC messages to turn individual blocks on and off. So let's start with that. And then after that, we're going to talk about one of the coolest features, that this is now a synth. In this example, I'm going to use the scenes on the FM3 to send MIDI CC commands to Digit, turning individual modules on and off. My first scene is a dry Friedman BE. It sounds like this with my Les Paul. Scene 2 is the same amp, but I have sent a MIDI CC using the FM3 MIDI block to activate the convolution reverb in Digit. On scene 3, I'm going to do something a little bit different. The amp block on the FM3 is going to change over to the tri-axis lead. There's going to be a multi-delay on the FM3, and Digit is going to activate a granular effect. This is really cool. I can then move over to scene 4, which is the same tri-axis lead amp, no delay from the FM3, but I am going to use the looping delay from Digit as well as the phaser in the FM3. Pretty fun stuff. What we'll do next is we're going to use Digit to send MIDI CCs to the FM3 to essentially add an extra 3 foot switches to our FM3. So using Digit like a MIDI controller. In this example, I'm actually not using any effects from Digit. We are just going to hear Digit as a MIDI controller. So I'm sending MIDI CCs from Digit to my FM3 to activate the phaser, multi-delay, and delay. Check it out. And of course, I could use the two together in various ways. I could have the foot switches on digit as extra individual controls for my FM3. I could use the FM3 Scenes to switch different modules on and off in digit, or a whole bunch of things in between. It's a really powerful and flexible setup. Now that we've done that and had a look at some of the really cool applications for digit, in my case with the FM3, which I love having access to 3 extra foot switches, and I love just kind of the crazy modular nature of this and having it as a really accessible piece of outboard gear with a touchscreen. This has a whole different set of firmware that you can load in called Bibo, and Bibo now has synth modules and something called the meta modulator. So this is essentially like a whole Eurorack synth setup in a tiny little box now, which is pretty amazing. And just a warning, I am by no means a synth player, but I'm just going to kind of show off a couple of really basic presets that I made using the synth module, and then I'm using an Oxygenate MIDI controller just to trigger some MIDI notes in digit. So enjoy some of these sounds. I've really been digging them. It is a deep, deep rabbit hole to get into, and something that hopefully I'll get a chance to explore later on the channel. But for now, yeah, you can get synth sounds out of this, and you can actually run them totally independent of the guitar stuff. Like you could go in and out of input 1 and output 1 for your guitar or bass or whatever, and you can use input 3 and 4 and output 3 and 4 for the synth stuff, which is pretty amazing. Wonderful stuff, and that is really, really fun. Again, like I said, I am not a synth player. One thing that I try to be is a guitar player, so let's hear a couple of the direct sounds out of this, because this also doubles up as a great backup. There are a couple of power amp emulations in there, and I want to show off a couple of presets that I wrote for this that are included in the latest firmware, along with some cabinet IRs that I made and sent to Lockie at Poly, and he's included them in the latest firmware, so you should be able to just basically turn your Digit on and load these up and they should work. And I think they're pretty decent sounds for a kind of bluesy tone. Then there is a bluesy tone with spring reverb and a harmonic tremolo using the Oberheim filter and the difference block, which lets you basically set up an LFO for the low frequencies to basically be in phase this way, and an LFO for the high frequencies, which is 180 degrees out of phase, giving you a harmonic trem, which is pretty rad, I think. I'm also going to show off the SV bass module in there and my very, very subpar bass skills. There's a few more things you can do with Digit. No doubt this is going to continue to develop and get a whole bunch of extra stuff. The synth stuff in there, for me at the moment, is totally over my head. That's something that I need to spend a whole bunch of time learning. I think this, if you're a synth player, and if you're a synth player watching my guitar channel, thanks so much. I'm flattered that you would take the time to listen to me basically abuse all the things that you love. But this is like a kind of powerhouse now, and I'm sure it is going to get a bunch of firmware updates and a bunch of new features over time. The meta modulator is really cool. All the effects, delays, the kind of like creative potential of this unit just gets me so excited. And the fact that you can now integrate it using MIDI CCs with stuff like the Fractal FM3 or again, any controller which can send MIDI CCs is really, really exciting. So there's a few more things you can do with Digit. Let me know your thoughts. If you've gone and grabbed one of these, let me know what you're liking about it in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.